Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered, the podcast that takes the mystery out of commercial real estate and makes it accessible for everyone. I'm Caleb David, a broker, investor, and community builder with over a decade of experience helping businesses and individuals bring their visions to life. Here we break down the market, share expert insights, and talk about the opportunities that commercial real estate creates for businesses and communities alike. No fluff, no gatekeeping, just real, unfiltered conversations that empower you to navigate the space with confidence. So whether you're an investor, a business owner, or simply curious about commercial real estate, welcome. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody, to Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. Today, I am so excited to have an incredible professional with us that I think you're going to get so much from. She's helped my business in the past and given some great advice. But I want to introduce you to Reanna Werner. She's an MBA, SPHR, SHRM-SCP, a lot of letters. She's smart. She's the founder and chief problem solver of HR Branches, a firm that is dedicated to helping small businesses navigate HR challenges. With over 25 years of HR experience, Reanna has built a reputation for making HR accessible, affordable, and impactful for business owners. Her expertise spans HR strategy, compliance, leadership development, and workplace culture, making her a go-to resource for business owners looking to build strong, compliant, and thriving teams. Through HR Branches and her podcast, Show Me Yours, she provides practical solutions for managing employees, minimizing risk, and scaling businesses effectively. Welcome, Reanna. Thanks for joining the show.
Hello, hello. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here today, Caleb.
Awesome. Well, Reanna, you and I and your husband have a long history of interacting together within the community, within businesses, and referring stuff. You guys have had your own commercial real estate journey. We've done a couple of spaces for you guys over the last, 10 years. And, just wanted to kind of hear what you could provide as far as some input on some of the challenges that you guys faced.
Yeah, we went through our fair share, and thank God we had you to navigate a lot of this for us. And looking back at the beginning of our relationship and how we crossed paths, Caleb, it was through commercial endeavors and trying to find the right space for two very unique businesses that I don't think at that time, looking back in retrospect, we weren't fully sure of who we were. And I think that space really is a part of who you are, and it's your brand identity in essence.
And workplace culture that you provide for your employees.
It is. It's a place, though the walls, when it comes to your business, it speaks so much about your culture and your brand and who you are without even having to say anything, right? And then not to mention location. Like you put your business into the wrong spot, it won't thrive as if, you put it into the right spot. And that's kind of what we started down the path of with you, as you may recall. We started off as kind of super small mom and pop, and we decided we wanted to keep our business. When we first started looking for commercial real estate, we wanted to keep our business close to home, which was in Monument, Colorado. And so it's a small town that doesn't really have a whole lot of small businesses, or, it's got a great environment for business, but it wasn't conducive to the type of business we eventually started building. And I think through the exploration and looking at commercial real estate and Monument, it exposed a lot of who we are. And through subsequent conversations, one of the most impactful was with, our mayor, not then, but he was another fellow small business owner that we knew in the community, but a conversation with him and him talking about downtown Colorado Springs and how, our local city leaders are building such a great infrastructure and a thriving small business environment in downtown Colorado Springs. And I think that piqued our ears, and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
That's where we should build our business.
Yeah.
And then we called you on a whim and we're like, we're completely shifting here.
Yes, I remember.
You remember that? And I'm sure your head
Yes.
was probably spinning and your eyes were like, what in the world?
But it's great because, I think that what you said is identifying who you are is so important. I think personally and then professionally, and having the resources around you. And you and I both are super involved with the small business community here and get to have the opportunity to coach other businesses in different areas.
Uh-huh.
And I think that is super vital. And I want to thank you because, when I first launched out on my own about 5 or so years ago, I came to you and I was like, do I need to hire another broker? Do I need to hire,
Uh-huh.
an assistant? And we sat down there for a couple of hours and you just kind of helped me strategize to figure out who was I as a business and what were the actual needs. And as a
Right.
result, hired somebody who's just been phenomenal for my company. So I want to thank you for that.
Right. Oh my gosh.
I know, it's crazy. But
That's
let's,
amazing.
it really is. Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
Incredible. And looking back at all of that, I think that's also a really important thing, for small business owners, period, but also in what we do is there's one aspect of being the expert in what you do, but there's also this aspect of just being able to be someone to lean on in
Mhm.
those moments. And we've been able to do that for each other for all of these years, lean on each other in our expertise, but also in those moments of just, this is exhausting and
Yeah,
it's hard and it's mucky. And I think there's so much more to what both of us do in our professions and supporting people that you've
yeah.
just got to be that place of peace where people can fall and say,
Yes.
okay. And you're like, I've got you.
Yes. No, I love that. And that is so how I look at my business. And I've seen you guys put that into practice so often with how much you serve and all the things that you do. So kind of transitioning to maybe there's a small commercial real estate company out there or small business owner. What are some of the most common HR mistakes that business owners tend to make?
Oh boy. I think there's layers of that question. Of course, in a lot of these realms, those easy questions are always the complicated questions. And I think there's layers, but when it really comes down to it, and you kind of tear away all of the layers of the onion, it
Mhm.
comes down to leadership.
Mm,
Biggest mistake a leader can do is realize as a small business owner or even as a commercial real estate broker, is that you're a leader. The moment you decide to take on your first employee, you transition from being just a small business owner into being a leader. And your success is dependent upon the success of others.
yeah.
And so you're not now an individual contributor to where your success is dependent on yourself and your actions, but it's what you pour into other people.
Yeah.
And from my HR experience in supporting, hundreds of businesses here, the number one critical downfall I've found, even when I see compliance issues and cultural issues and, all of the yucky,
Yeah.
it always starts with the leadership of an
Yeah.
organization. And that leader dictates every other aspect
Yeah.
of the experience of employment.
Yeah, and I feel like, that it's necessary for a leader to be curious and ask the questions so that they can have the supports that they need to pour into others and have the systems and processes in place so that things don't jam up. Because, I mean, let's be honest, so many businesses struggle with the administration or the people side of things, the employees, and there's emotion involved. And if we have all these administrative blocks and these strategies that aren't working, it's a recipe for disaster.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. If you don't have that infrastructure in place, something's destined to crumble, right?
Yeah.
And going back to, to talking about, taking a look in the mirror, I think there's a level of humility that a leader has to have. I think there's this misconception that a leader believes that they have to know it all. They
Yeah.
have to be that end all be all resource, the final answer, and I
Yeah.
know everything, right? But that is probably the furthest from the truth and what I've found as a quality leader.
Yeah.
Quality leaders typically are the ones who are not afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out together.
Yeah.
Let's research, or let's tap into our experts. And when you do trust and you tap into your experts, your capabilities really do grow.
Yeah.
Like in the world of HR, no, okay, very few, maybe with the exception of me, no small business owners are HR experts.
Right.
They
Right.
did not get into, owning a business to, understand policies and procedures and compliance and law
Yes.
and culture and leadership and how all of it intersects, right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to mention the complexities of payroll and benefits and all of that stuff.
Right.
Um, but when you believe you know it all,
Mm.
you're going to be destined and doomed to make all the mistakes
Yeah.
because you don't understand or appreciate the complexity that's
Yes.
involved or how to make it simple.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, no, that relates so much to even in commercial real estate. There's triple net leases, there's tenant improvements, there's all these different languages and things that are complicated. And
yeah,
that's our goal as a company is to make it approachable for people. And that's exactly what you do at HR branches. And
yeah.
so let me ask, so if somebody's starting a new business, they're going from just me to hiring one or two employees, what would your suggestions be of the first one or two steps for them to take to make sure they are on the right path?
Absolutely. First, keep it simple. When you hire your first few people, it can seem really intimidating and it's really easy to go down the employment rabbit hole of thinking, well, now, I need to add a whole bunch of insurance and I need to have health benefits and I have to have this robust benefit package and work-life balance and
Yeah.
all of these corporate things that are thrown at
Uh,
you. And in society, you believe that you have to provide. Um, your first few steps are really making sure that you've got your compliance platform set, right? Make sure you've got good workers' comp insurance. And that means when you've got workers' comp, you don't have to go to the state RAM Pinnacle, go shop the market, get something
right.
affordable. But also make sure you've got your right state account set up, family, unemployment, but also make sure you have a payroll system onboarded. Never try and attempt to run or
Oh,
calculate payroll on your own.
yes.
My husband's a CPA, and there have been so many times we've had prospective clients come in and they have this huge gaping mess of a payroll and they've got the IRS beating down their door
Yeah.
and the Department of Labor.
Yeah.
So it can be really ugly and really expensive really quick.
Yeah.
So making sure you've just got that basic set
Yeah.
up. And then just, posters and paperwork and all of that, just make sure it's good.
Yeah.
And then I really truly believe the next step is asking yourself why. Why do I need to hire?
Yeah.
Is it because I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I'm overloaded? Because if that's the answer, that means you're going to hire out of desperation.
Yeah.
You should never hire out of desperation. Take a look. And I do believe I'm an HR geek.
Yeah.
It's going to sound terrible to say, but I think hiring should always be your last resort.
Mm.
Within your business, you should always look at efficiencies and processes because hiring, your payroll is always going to be your largest line item on your P&L.
Yeah.
And it's a very expensive investment, and you have to make sure that that investment yields a return.
Yes.
So you've got to do all the work on the front end, do a self-check, make sure you're not hiring out of desperation, make sure you know exactly what you're hiring for,
Yes.
and then put thought into who you're going to hire. And I'm telling you, Caleb, if anybody listening here has the idea of hiring friends and family,
Mm.
the first question they should ask themselves is, am I willing to give up this relationship in the name of business?
Yes.
Because I promise you, one party will unintentionally take advantage of the other party.
Yes. No, what great advice. That's really, really good advice and very practical. And obviously people can call, HR branches. They can call people that can kind of talk them through, here are the steps. And so how can businesses create compliant and scalable HR processes?
Um, how can businesses create compliance-based scalable processes? Um, first consult an expert.
Mhm.
I mean, going down the rabbit hole of understanding compliance, because you look at the complexities of local compliance, you look at state compliance, federal compliance, and then how it ties into your culture are very complex concepts to intermingle. So talking to an expert is always your best starting point. But sometimes you look at your budget and you're like, I can't afford that. So your rule of thumb is when it comes to compliance, at least look at the state CDLE website and get a general idea of what you're expected to do. Get the basics down. And then from there, keep it as simple as possible. We have a lot of local resources that you can tap into that are cost effective, like our local SBDC. I volunteer, you volunteer for the local SBDC. You can tap into us for, some complimentary consultation. We have our chamber. We've got a lot of great resources to at least get you started down the right path. Just don't always trust the internet.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And same with AI, but it's like, don't just go off of AI, call the expert. I tell clients all the time, if case in point, if they say, I can't afford to have an attorney review my lease or this contract. And I've seen many times that those exact same people who couldn't afford it and didn't have the experts weigh in ended up in a much worse situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes spending that little extra cost, even if it makes it hurt a little bit, is exactly what you need to get you on the right path to productivity, to making a profit, to changing your culture. And obviously, not every small business can hire, a full-time HR person that's an expert. So, what are some cost-effective strategies that small businesses could take advantage of?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. Like hiring that expert up front is a lot more affordable than paying all of those penalties, fees, and fines
Yeah.
and those oopsie costs.
Yeah.
Those are usually 10x,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So while it may not feel affordable up front, it really is. And hopefully you don't have to experience the back end
Right.
pain.
But you take
Uh,
that chance.
yeah, exactly. In addition, I think there's a lot of great resources that we put out to the community. If you go to hrbranches.com, we have a very robust blog that's full of helpful, up-to-date information. We're constantly releasing information on social media about current issues, current topics, compliance happenings, what's going on at our local and federal initiatives,
Yeah.
if that's what you want to call it right now,
Yeah.
confusion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of confusion going on in the marketplace
Yeah.
right now, and we help to unscramble that.
Yeah.
But as far as affordable, I have to say, Caleb, like hiring on the experts is your more affordable path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just left guessing.
Absolutely. And I think this is another importance for small businesses to consult with their local SBDCs all over the country.
Yeah.
These resources are there, folks. Just reach out, just Google, for example, ours is the SBDC of the Pikes Peak region. So do the SBDC of wherever you are and find out what resources are available. Some are more helpful than others. Ours here in Southern Colorado is absolutely robust and just incredible consultants.
Yeah.
But reach out and ask for that help before you make that decision to hire, before you make that decision to expand. Understand what your business plan needs to look like. You can get free support for your business plan through the SBDC. It's incredible what is available to us as small business owners. And so once we go through the process, we've consulted a bunch of people, we've made some hires, not out of desperation, not a family or friend member, but now you've got the talent. So how do you retain top talent? Because I know that's an issue.
It is. And interestingly enough, a lot of people put emphasis on money, right? Compensation.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Every time I do an employee engagement survey, look at national and local data, the trends and the indicators, and our workforce is speaking very loudly on this, is it's all about culture.
Yeah.
They want to work at a place that fills their soul in
Yes.
some capacity. Second is they want to be able to go to their kids' dance recitals.
Yeah.
They want to participate in their life. And when I say, like, I think the term work-life balance is completely overused and it's not accurate. There's no such thing as work-life balance, right? You're never going to get that 50-50. You're never going to be completely fulfilled. And honestly, if you're a true professional, you're always going to feel like you're failing at something.
Yeah.
Like, let's get over it, people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But how can you make sure you're not failing the people who mean the most to you and
Yeah.
allowing space for all the important stuff?
Yeah.
So there's that. But I do believe compensation is a part of the conversation. And my philosophy, and I tell my clients this all the time, is pay your people enough to take the conversation off the table.
Right.
That means pay them enough that, first, that really aligns with their job and what
Yeah.
they're producing for within their position
Yeah.
and what they're contributing towards the organization, but also pay them enough to where they're not worried about paying their bills.
Right.
They're not coming to work starving and living off of ramen because they're making a minimum wage and they're barely making ends meet.
Yes.
Like, that's not going to work. And you're not going to keep them because they've got to pay their bills. Like,
Right.
it's a part of, it's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
physiological
Absolutely.
needs.
Yeah.
So pay people enough to keep the conversation off the table. But then when you build your business, create a place where someone feels poured into. Again, going back to your leadership, set people up for success,
Yeah.
which means you pour in to them to make sure they're successful. And when
Yes.
they become successful, you'll be successful too.
And I think that brings up an important point, that if the leader's not being poured into, is not being humble enough to seek the help and the support that they need, that is, there's going to be an
So
issue.
true.
It's
There is. Absolutely. You as a leader, you have to pour into yourself.
yes.
Read the leadership books. Go and find your confidants and your tribe. So you're not
Yeah.
on an island. I think leaders, we tend to not put ourselves, we find ourselves on an
Yeah.
island and you feel very alone and very isolated. And you have to get out of that. You
Yeah.
have to find your tribe and your circle of confidence where you can go and just
Yes. And I think doing something that you love that is not work related,
uh-huh.
go on that hike, go fishing, color that book, get in the garden. I think I found, since I hit my mid 40s, like how important it is to take the time, because I can't run on adrenaline like I used to. It's not just fight or flight and let me just go, go, go. That doesn't work. At some point, that has to stop. And so you
Yes.
have to find not the work-life balance, but you've got to find a flow
Yeah.
that works for you. And you're setting that example for your employees as well.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. You have to find the flow that works for you.
Yeah.
I think we need to coin that right there. A
Yeah.
Caleb David terminology, find your flow, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is. Because I know many people who thrive in that go, go, go adrenaline, like, yeah, let's hustle it out.
Yeah.
And then I know other people who need to meditate and do yoga every morning just to get out of bed.
Yeah.
But what's your flow and what fills your soul?
Yes.
You start there.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to setting that example, how important that is, not just for your employees, but also your family. Because I remember when I was in that go, go, go state, like when I finally went on vacation or I had a weekend off, and I would get a text or an email from someone, because I'm one of those crazy people who, if it's on the to-do list, I have to check it off as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But I've learned that sometimes you need to stop and wait and be in the space where you're healthy, you're mentally all there, you're not just pushing it down the road. But finding that time, like there's times where I'll literally in the middle of the day just be like, I'm going to go lay down for 30 minutes, because after that 30 minutes, I can be better for myself and my clients. And I'm not feeling resentment when my time off is being interrupted. Right.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I think it's important to also give employees space, for when they need the push and pull, take their kids to the doctor or whatever it might be. So I know that there's, when you and I talked originally, we were like, okay, do I need to bring on a 1099 contractor or an employee? Like how do employment laws work, and what's the difference there between the two?
Oh, that's a big one. It's a really big one. And I have this question, or I answer this question all the time, and I'm really glad you brought it up because everybody needs to listen right here, right now.
Yeah.
So the state of Colorado is really particular about the 1099 relationship or classification. So my rule of thumb that I tell everybody, I'll scream it from the mountaintops, is this: 1099 contractor relationship is pretty much, you can sum it up this way. My business is doing business with your business. Okay. So I'm going to say this again. My business is doing business with your business. I've sat through a ton, more than I'd like to admit, a ton of these audits.
Yeah.
And when you get audited or for a classification issue, typically you're being audited by the IRS or the Department of Labor. The scary one is IRS because they could actually classify this as tax evasion.
Yeah.
Because you're not paying your payroll taxes.
Right.
Like, it's scary and yucky. So during these audits, this is your standard checklist of what they're going to look at. First thing they're going to ask for is a contractor agreement. Okay, well, that's easily drafted up, check, right? They're going to ask for all the invoices that the contractor has given you for payment. A lot of individuals or small businesses pay their contractors out of payroll. That is a huge no-no. Never, ever, ever pay a contractor out of payroll, because remember, do you ever pay a business that you're doing business with out of payroll?
Right. No. Right.
Caleb, I would never pay you out of payroll.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point.
Yeah. So also they will ask for proof that the contractor is able to market and do business with your competitors. And this is really big for, the commercial real estate industry, because if you bring on an admin who's a contractor, are you really going to want them to go work for your competitor? Probably not. Right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to ask for proof. They're going to ask for a website. Does the contractor have a website? Do they have business cards? What are they doing? They're going to ask, are you providing that computer? What email do they do business out of? If they have a calebdavid.com email address, that's going to send up red flags, right? Because they are acting as your voice. And when a person acts as your voice, they're typically acting as an employee.
Right.
So those are the majority of the big aspects. Of course, time, dictation of time. A lot of people, it's easy to say, well, I don't tell them when to work.
Yeah.
That doesn't fly anymore.
Right.
It does not, especially with the remote working environment. It's common for employees to work at their leisure as well.
Yeah. And I would say for real estate companies out there, if you're kind of in this growth mode and trying to figure out what to do, definitely consult your CPA. If you've got an HR person that you can talk to your attorney. And in real estate, it's, we have 1099 contractors, but we also have a very robust contractor agreement that spells out very clearly what is their role and what is the relationship. So I think those things are really, really vital. And I really appreciate you framing it that way, as you're doing business with another business. And it actually makes perfect sense. But that's something that I learned today.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Well, so what should businesses keep in mind if they're considering hiring, firing, downsizing, outsourcing? What should they do, and what things should they be considering to make sure that they're avoiding some legal pitfalls?
Yes. When it comes to making any employment related decision, there's a few factors. First, you have to ask yourself, if it's an employment decision that has some sort of adverse impact, a negative impact on the employee, you do have to ask yourself, okay, why am I making this decision? Am I making this decision based off of performance, productivity, attendance, or is it some sort of bias that I have? What exactly is going on here? Second, document, document, document in the world of employment and in the world of, attorneys tell me this all the time, in the world of law,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen unless it's written down. And so if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. And if you
Right.
go to court, if you get pulled into court for any employment related decision, and you're like, well, they did this and they did this and they did this, and the judge is going to look at you and say,
Hearsay.
prove it.
Yeah.
And the only way you can prove it is by writing it down. And I know I really should get a tattoo that says document, document, document.
Well, and I think too, that ties into the importance of having your compliance set up properly. And something we haven't talked about yet is you make sure you have an employee handbook
Yeah.
that has been documented and signed and put on file. I feel like many pitfalls could be as far as hiring, firing, especially the firing, if those issues have not, if they've agreed to these, what the culture of your company is, how things are handled, and then, but you still have to document
Yeah.
to refer back to that original. So I think you're right. I think, not like, and what leader really wants to sit around and just be like nitpicking and let me record everything.
No.
But pick and choose. Don't do it based on emotion. Base
Mhm.
it, be objective as possible. We understand that it's your small business. It affects you as the leader, but this also affects the employees and their families. So to be as just and fair as possible, I think is important.
Circling back around to the employee handbook, this always blows people's minds, but the reason why you have an employee handbook is because in the eyes of the law, you as the employer, it's your responsibility to communicate your expectations.
Yes.
If you don't tell your employees in writing what your expectations are, you're at fault. For an example, when I first started HR branches, I had a client come to me and she says, I terminated this employee before we started doing business together. This is why she came to me. She says, I terminated this employee for sexual harassment. He was harassing one of my clients. And so I terminated him because I don't want that to happen, right? And she says, now he's taking me to court for unlawful termination. So she went to court. And because she didn't have a sexual harassment policy, she was found at fault.
Wow.
Because she did not set the expectation or tell the employee not to sexually harass her client.
Right.
I mean, this guy literally smacked the client on the butt.
Wow. Which is
Yeah.
completely inappropriate. And, I think almost anybody would have a knee-jerk reaction like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I would, but had I not met with you and talked with you and consulted my attorney, the importance of that sexual harassment and sexual conduct is important to be in there, along with many other things that as a new business owner, we're not thinking about.
No,
Because you're just like, let's just go, let's go, let's go. But sometimes I feel like take that step back, take a deep breath.
Well, we
And
all start our businesses with that Pollyanna perspective, like, oh, I'm gonna hire this person, they're gonna be great. And then all of a sudden it goes south and you're like, ah.
yeah.
And in a way, I mean, attorneys do this all the time. You kind of build your business for all the things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Protect you.
Well, and I think it's an ongoing conversation, right? When it comes to handbooks, when it comes to company policies, because as laws change, right, that affects there can be some trickle down effect on that. And not everybody needs to make sure they know what every Senate bill is that affects employees, but at least have
That's my
access.
job.
That's exactly my point. You nailed it. Oh my gosh, totally. Well, so I'm gonna go and gosh, I feel like we could talk for so much longer, but I've got a few more questions for you.
Okay.
One of them at the end is going to be a surprise that I've stolen from somebody else that I just loved when I was on their podcast. But when should a business consider hiring an in-house HR person versus outsourcing?
Very easy. HR has always had a rule of thumb. It's every 100 to 125 employees, you should have one HR professional. It's your common ratio. So typically what we advise, depending on your industry, there's of course that give and take, but what we advise is when you get to at about 75 employees, you want to start thinking about bringing on your own in-house HR.
Okay.
Before then, you always need an HR advisor.
Yes.
You really don't need one full-time. Even part-time is not necessary. fractional is the way to go.
Okay.
Outsource, fractional, someone who can peer into your business, honor your culture, and help you navigate through the turbulent stuff and give you sound advice.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so I want to go to some of the most surprising HR challenges that you've encountered. You've shared one, that
Uh-huh.
you probably weren't surprised, but the business owner was surprised. What are some of the more surprising or unique challenges that you've encountered?
Gosh, my husband says I could write a book, and I probably could. I've got a whole entire CRM full of stories that'll be, locked under lock and key until right. But I think there's a few. And the interesting part is, Caleb, is that they never happen just once.
Mm,
We actually see these, and they still surprise me all the time. One, surprising to me in the fact that when I got into building the firm, I didn't expect this to become a trend.
mm,
But what I have found is the passive leaders who want to make everybody happy
yeah.
are the leaders who create the weakest culture.
Mm,
So passive leaders who are afraid to have difficult conversations usually manifest a culture of favoritism, non-productivity, theft. It's just the way it goes. Let me give
yeah.
you an example. I onboarded a client a couple of years ago. He was the kindest soul. And as we started kind of digging into his best practices, we found out, his employees were showing up every shift 30 minutes late, leaving 30 minutes early, but also charging him for that time. That's
Mm,
paycheck theft,
yeah. Yeah.
or time card fraud. But on top of that, they were stealing his product, walking out with it, and expecting that it was their right to
Wow.
leave the premises with his product. And he just wanted to be a nice guy and didn't want to wreck the ship, so he wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
And of course, he grew resentment towards his employees and his staff. I mean, how would you want to walk into your own business knowing this is happening to
Right.
you underneath your nose,
Right.
right?
Well, and then going back to what you said earlier, the importance of setting expectations, right?
Yeah,
Like if that had
exactly.
been in place and you held to that,
Mhm.
you don't
Yeah.
end up in that position.
If you speak up and say, this isn't going to work, you've got to show up on time and you got to stop taking my stuff or you're out of here, it would have never happened.
Right.
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 We had one client who had an employee, he was higher up in leadership, sexually harassed every single woman in
Mm,
the organization. And how they came to us is they actually they were taken to court and they were court ordered to hire on an HR team to help them with their HR matters. What the owner did, he fired this guy, but then turned around and hired the sexual harasser as a contractor.
mm,
And
wow.
so, of course, we jump in and we start helping, rounding everything out. And then we realize this guy's still coming in, harassing everybody as a contractor.
Just because you change the status from to 1099.
Yeah,
Wow. That's shocking.
I know. And this guy costed this company hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal
Wow.
fees and fines and penalties and
Yes.
back pay and all of the
Yeah.
stuff.
And, and I know I'm beating a dead horse. This is exactly why you talk to the experts up front.
Yeah.
And I want to transition a little bit more to your podcast. And
Okay.
I'm really excited. And I mentioned to you before we got on this call that when I saw that you were doing a podcast, I was on the edge and I was like, she's doing it. I can do it too. And so I'm like, I
Love
just
it.
want to thank you for kind of giving me that final push. But yeah, how does your podcast help business owners kind of navigate these HR? I know you've got your blog and all those resources that people need to go and find. But let's
Yeah.
talk specifically about the podcast and kind of how you help people navigate HR.
Well, funny enough, Caleb, we don't really talk about HR. I mean, it comes up in our
Yeah.
podcast, but the theme behind our podcast, and here I don't even think you know this.
I may not.
You don't know. We're about to drop a really big bomb.
Great.
So, I have HR branches, and then Brian has BRW tax and accounting. And we've actually been working for the past year towards merging both businesses.
Very cool.
And we're going to be launching the new business July 1 of this year. And
Congrats.
what we're creating is this small business hub, where you have accountants and HR professionals solving small business problems together side by side.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to launch that. And Show Me Yours is all about supporting small businesses through life lessons. And what we do is we talk with various small business owners about the biggest mistake that they've learned in business. We all feel as if we're on that island, that metaphorical island that we were talking about earlier, and how alone it is. And you go through these mistakes and this heaviness all on your own, and you carry that weight on your back. And while you're going through it, it's tough and it's murky and it's hard, but then you go back through and you get to the other side and you say, I see why I had to go through that.
Yeah.
Get it now.
Yeah.
And so we discuss that, and we do it with a lot of humor, a couple of cocktails, and we sit in our podcast studio, grandma's living room, and we reflect. And in those moments, it lifts away some of the heaviness and brings other people in. So hopefully other small business owners don't feel so alone, because most of the time we all have the same problems that we've had to navigate. But for some reason, we feel like it's all ours, and it's a way to kind of share and release.
Yeah. And I think it also fosters that vulnerability and humility that I think is so needed, because we don't have to be strong all the time. And every one of us goes through things that we have to learn from. And you're right. It's like to be able to reflect and appreciate why you had to, I think helps prepare you for your next steps and the next challenge that comes up. So next I'm going to, before we go into kind of where people can find you, I'm going to ask you a question that Steve Ramona had asked me on the Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast, and just a great guy. And it kind of came out of the blue, but he said, okay, here's the deal. You're going out to eat, you're going by yourself, and there's a table of 4 reserved for you. So whether it's someone dead or alive, in this moment right now, who would be the 3 people that you would invite or want to talk to at that table? And what would you be eating?
Oh, and what would I be eating?
Always food.
Okay. Gosh, see, I love this question, but you're right. It changes all the time.
Yes.
Okay, so as you can tell, I'm a leadership geek, and my favorite leadership author is Patrick Lencioni. So he'd have to sit at the table. I have so many questions for that guy.
Yeah.
But also my pappy. He was a serial entrepreneur my whole entire life. And everything from watching him be that shiesty car lot owner to, a restaurateur to everything else. I would just love to circle back around today as a small business owner and discuss business with him.
Yeah.
And then always my husband.
Yeah.
I love
He's an all right guy.
He's pretty good. He's really freaking smart too. So
yes. And we are going to be having him on the podcast in the future as well. So I can't wait for that, because he's had to deal with all my crazy tax stuff, between being self-employed, having employees, running a nonprofit. He's been amazing. So I'm excited to have him. But Reanna, tell me where people can find you, and we'll have this in the show notes. But where can people find you in HR Branches?
Absolutely. Find us at hrbranches.com. If you guys have questions, you can set up a complimentary consult with me directly through our website, or you can go to the SBDC and set up a consult with them. In addition, you can give us a call. We love having people come in and visit us. So set an appointment, come in, chat with us. We're in downtown Colorado Springs, so you can come have lunch and hang out with the cool kids in town. And then in addition, we've got the Show Me Yours podcast, which you can find on any podcast streaming channel out there, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, we've got it all. So we're not that hard to find.
Yeah. Well, your name is so unique. And then I know on Instagram is at HR Branches, so I'm excited and very excited for the merging of your companies, and excited to see how that unveils and how many more businesses you're going to be able to help. Just thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your fun and knowledge to us today. And I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a great conversation, and I look forward. Keep an eye out in the mail for our launch party invitation.
Awesome. Perfect. Have a great time, everyone. That's a wrap on this episode of Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. I hope you found value in today's conversation and feel more confident about navigating the world of commercial real estate. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who could benefit from these insights. You can connect with me, Caleb David, and the team at David Commercial Real Estate. Just check the show notes for more information. Thanks for listening, and remember, creating space is more than just real estate. It's about building community. See you next time.